January 1946. The early morning air outside Manila is sharp and heavy, a stillness breaking only with the gravel crunch of a battered army truck. Inside sit 12 Japanese women, silhouettes bent inward for warmth and uncertain comfort, faces marked by exhaustion and stoic dread. They have survived months in hiding, surrender, and the crushing rituals of defeat. For most, the humiliation of capture is not just a matter of military failure, it is a fracture of personal, familial, and national identity. Hands folded, eyes drifting down, each remains locked in thought, haunted by the distance from home and the weight of new regimes, shaping their fate. The truck rattles to its stop at the wire-bound edge of a sprawling POW compound, a place that is neither truly prison nor sanctuary. American MPs move with practiced efficiency, unslinging rifles, opening gates, and calling out instructions. Their tone is not cruel or sharp, but measured, tireless, a protocol born from months of occupation and the logistics of post-war management. "This way, ladies," the lead MP says softly, guiding the women down from the truck, boots slipping on frost and damp stone. Around them, the camp stirs. Allied soldiers, Filipino staff, Red Cross nurses gathering rations and preparing a modest breakfast drawn from thin supply lines. The kitchen aromas, boiled potatoes, bread, a faint whiff of coffee, float over the compound, mingling with the dust kicked up by morning movements. In the compound, the sense of newness is everywhere. Some of the Japanese women scan the landscape for anything familiar: a banner, a whispered phrase in their own tongue, a glimpse of hierarchy. What they find instead is a collage of unfamiliar routines: Allied troops joking with kitchen staff, nurses moving easily beside engineers, Red Cross volunteers lugging tin kettles and bread trays across open ground. Everything is informal, unhurried, bracingly egalitarian. The order which once governed their world, where rank, gender, and duty patterned every meal, every greeting, is nowhere in sight. Led by a Red Cross nurse, the women file toward the central mess hall. Eyes flick nervously to every side, seeking the invisible boundaries their own upbringing taught them. Instead, the hall is a broad, open space where soldiers and civilians, men and women, different ranks and nationalities, all sit together. The tables are simple: tin plates stacked, tea poured, conversations abuzz in English, Tagalog, and hesitant Japanese. Allied nurses exchange stories with American MPs. Filipino cooks joke quietly with chaplains. There is no division by rank, no ritual separation of men from women, no markers of superiority, at least none that the women can discern. For a moment, the Japanese group halts, caught at the threshold of the mess, unsure whether to cross, unsure whether their presence will disrupt or offend. Their leader, herself only a year removed from her post as an Imperial Army nurse, searches for guidance and finds none. The Allied nurse inviting them in does so with a gentle gesture and a reassuring glance. The women step forward, uncertain, backs straight with tension, and find their places at the communal table. Their hands remain folded, palms pressed tight, waiting for instruction about how to proceed. The first moments at the table unfold in near silence. Each woman receives a plate: plain boiled rice, bread, a cup of weak tea. The American nurse smiles, pours tea, and says, "Please eat." The response is a hesitant bow, eyes still lowered, habits holding fast, each move measured as though watched by officers of the old regime. But minutes pass, and the forced awkwardness is broken by a cook who asks, in careful Japanese, "How is the rice?" Whispers of "oishi," delicious, ripple among the group, and a shy gratitude is exchanged. Food, for so long rationed and weaponized, becomes a bridge across silence. Older prisoners follow the structures they remember, bowing before eating, praying quietly, waiting for elders to begin. Younger women, emboldened by the scene, look around and gradually copy new habits, sipping tea in rhythm with the nurses, passing plates without concern for rank. Conversation flickers hesitantly, questions about weather, food, customs. Anxiety fades, replaced by the distracting necessity of nourishment, and the subtle encouragement of Allied staff who refill cups and share small jokes about the blandness of rations. Days begin to layer, routines repeating. The women adapt, sometimes with reluctance, to being served at the table alongside men and women of every station. The mess hall noises, laughter, greetings, prayers, become less foreign. Each encounter softens the edges of discipline learned in their youth. Guards worry less about order and more about recovery. Doctors, observing the change, note that communal meals now bring faster psychological adjustment, fewer instances of grief and isolation, and a gradual willingness to accept life after defeat. The shock of seeing men and women eat together, once a symbol of the collapse of old Japan, shifts meaning in the daily routine. It becomes less a threat and more a changing tide. Surrender consequences lived in real time, faith in dignity found through shared bread and small gestures of patience. Women who clung to ritual find space for questions and sometimes even laughter at the table. The mess, a place of nerves and unfamiliarity, now shelters slow, day-by-day transformation, a tissue of new relationships and survival stitched in the rhythms of morning, noon, and night. Across the weeks, new routines settle on the camp, their quiet persistence shaping every waking hour. American Red Cross nurses arrive with magazines tucked under their arms, no longer a novelty but a gentle expectation. The ritual of sharing spreads. Each lunch and dinner finds Japanese women gathered in small groups, heads bent together over pages of English text, fingers tracing images and headlines. The texture of the magazine, its glossy paper, sometimes wrinkled and patched with tape, feels strangely luxurious against skin habituated to rationed cloth and cold steel. In the mess hall, food remains a symbol of survival, the taste of rice and biscuits marking the boundary between defeat and fragile hope. But the sound of turning pages, the small bursts of laughter at comic strips and celebrity photographs, now signal an alternate abundance, a more elusive freedom. Historical context fills the spaces between meals. Official camp logs detail improvements in morale among POWs exposed to recreation, entertainment, and education. Field reports written by senior medical officers cite magazines and radio shows as key factors in the gradual rehabilitation of prisoners, especially among those traumatized by the shock of Japan's unconditional surrender. In Manila and other camps, American women record in personal diaries the progress of hesitant friendships. A former enemy telling, for the first time, stories of her childhood, her dreams or her family left behind. They stared at our magazines in disbelief, one Red Cross volunteer wrote. Some said it felt like holding a piece of the future. The rhythm inside the barracks transforms alongside these rituals, where the first days were dominated by silence broken only by orders and roll calls. The magazine becomes a locus for conversation. The prisoners, once taught to expect only discipline and deprivation, discover that curiosity survives even destruction. Some practice phrases in English, trying to understand advertisements for canned fruit or miracle cleansers. Others only stare at photographs of bright city lights, parades, or store windows overflowing with goods. In private moments, the magazines are a resource for hope, hidden beneath pillows, shared in secret, studied as if the images might offer instruction for a different kind of life. Emotional contrast runs like a current beneath this new routine. Japanese women raised under strict expectations of military and cultural isolation find in the magazines not only abundance, but contradiction. Their memories of the imperial homeland, marked by hunger and hierarchy, make the stories of American plenty almost surreal. Some confess confusion, telling nurses that the magazine's jokes and advertisements seem like harmless dreams. Others admit envy, or feel a sharp sting of shame that their own country's newspapers had been filled only with instruction, discipline, and the grind of war. Each page turned is a layer peeled away from old ideologies, a window onto choices, consumer freedom, and the unsettling ease of recreation. Documented evidence intensifies the narrative. Prisoner accounts, collected in oral histories decades later, describe how magazines became objects of fierce debate. Some elders in the camp warned against foreign influence, urging the young to treat these pages as propaganda. Others encouraged engagement, arguing that understanding the enemy's world was necessary for adapting to post-war reality. Records from Red Cross relief committees detail the frequency with which new issues were requested, noting that circulation far exceeded initial expectation and that prisoners often asked for extra copies to send home to surviving relatives. The magazine now embodies a transformation in thinking, a subtle revolution sparked by the collision of old ritual and new choice. Above bunks, cutout photographs and recipes decorate walls otherwise bare and utilitarian, a mosaic of imagination built amid scarcity. Group leaders organize informal classes, reading aloud stories about democracy, technology, and post-war life in America. Nurses sometimes discover hand-drawn versions of magazine covers in the bedsheets, testimony not only to adaptation but to hope. In those moments, the object is no longer foreign, no longer a threat. It is a symbol of agency, of the restoration of self. Communal mealtimes reinforce this shift. Every meal is now followed by the ritual passing of magazines, the sharing of translated articles, the gathering of women around tables marked by the humble abundance of tea and bread. The transition from discipline to curiosity, from shame to hesitant pride, finds its rhythm in these rooms. When they read about American children's games, they smiled and explained the games they once played in school, a nurse wrote in a report to headquarters. Each story traded was a step away from old wounds, a step toward ordinary life. Seasonal rains sweep across the camp, blurring the wire and barracks in sheets of gray. Inside, the ritual of magazines offers warmth that food cannot. Japanese women gather near the mess hall, their curiosity growing as Red Cross nurses arrive with new stacks. Each magazine, weathered from countless readings, holds stories of distant holidays, seasonal recipes, winter sports, and American towns unscarred by war. Prisoners huddle together under dim bulbs, eyes wide in the shadows as they trace images of roaring fires, children sledding, families joined around tables laden with abundance. The recurring symbolism of food persists, now joined by the celebratory pages of Thanksgiving and New Year's issues. For many prisoners, the descriptions of feasts and togetherness become a touchstone, markers of hope, fragments of a world where suffering is not the universal state. Historical documentation reinforces this evolution. Allied after-action reports detail how magazines reduced tensions and increased personal resilience among POWs. Doctors note improvement in appetite and reductions in insomnia, linking well-being not only to food and medicine, but to the daily presence of these magazines and the human exchange they engendered. Over time, interviews with prisoners reveal that the recurring gift of magazines became a symbol of American democracy, a tangible proof that freedom could mean stories chosen, leisure found, lives rebuilt from ordinary wants and pleasures. Contrasts remain stark. Interviews conducted and translated in post-war Japan preserve voices of women reflecting on the lies they believed about Allied life before captivity. We expected only hunger, guards, and cold, but we witnessed laughter and patience. We see women who work and read and joke as equals with men. Missives sent home when permitted by camp authorities mix bittersweet accounts of defeat with descriptions of mysterious American customs and magazine stories. The Americans bring papers with stories of plenty, and though we do not understand everything, we learn that the ordinary is valued. Life can be playful, dreams permitted. Transformation, however small, unfolds in layers. A young woman, formerly a nurse near Manila, learns to translate stories for her friends at each meal, building bridges between cultures. Pages are traded as currency for good news, questions about freedom, and shy speculation about a future no longer entirely dictated by the past. With every exchange, the ideology of deprivation begins to fade and the memory of shame gives way to hope. Magazines become a daily witness, a symbolic touchstone marking the shift from command to curiosity, from isolation to human connection. The magazine, now worn and patched, its pages a constant companion, embodies not just information and entertainment, but the deepest transformation wrought by defeat and unexpected generosity. In the act of reading, sharing, copying images by hand, the Japanese women learn that abundance is not only safety from hunger, but open access to story and meaning. They realize that democracy in the American sense is written as much in recipes and advertisements as in declarations or treaties. Spring unfurls in the camp with cautious optimism. The routine of magazine deliveries persists, each cycle reinforcing bonds forged outside the strictures of war. Japanese women now anticipate the arrival of American nurses not only for bread and tea, but for the latest stories and images. Their barracks walls display collages of recipes, movie advertisements, and pictures of bustling American life, fragments of a world that remains distant yet achingly close in aspiration. Meals together stretch beyond subsistence, becoming slow rituals where news and laughter ripple through languages, every page passed a note of reconciliation. The symbol of food endures. While the alarm of hunger diminishes, the subtler abundance of reading, imagination, and leisure becomes central, representing more than just survival. Historical records from Red Cross field teams capture the subtle transformations. Reports document how requests for magazines eclipsed those for luxuries, how prisoners formed informal reading clubs, and how camp morale steadily improved. One entry notes, "When magazines arrive, the youngest prisoners light up, and even the elders grow quiet, listening as someone reads from the back page." Letters home grow more expansive, mixing the sorrow of loss with tales of surprising comfort and dignity. A nurse writing to her family in Ohio describes, "Giving magazines felt like giving hope. Moments when enemies became neighbors." The emotional contrast between the broken expectations of the Japanese women and the reality they experience sharpens as months pass. They recall, often together at night, the rigid lessons of empire, that Americans would offer only discipline, cold order, and distance. Instead, American women bring not only magazines but kindness, respect, and a form of peaceful abundance foreign to the old world of rank and suffering. Conversations shift from survival to the meaning of freedom. Prisoners debate the virtues of democracy as described in magazine opinion pieces and cartoons. Each meal, each reading session, chips away at the hard surface of ideology until, quietly, new convictions begin to take root. This symbolic transformation becomes enduring. Food had once been the measure of power and discipline, a marker of control, rationed and weaponized. Now the magazine becomes the more powerful symbol, tracing a steady arc through the story. It is present at every turning point. In surprise, in adaptation, in hope. The communal sharing of magazines is less spectacle than steady practice. It reanimates memory, reshapes identity, and models a possible future where dignity is found not merely in survival, but in access to story, to choice, and to imaginative possibility. Summer arrives, and the camp's boundaries blur further as routines of scarcity are steadily supplanted by rituals of community and remembrance. The recurring magazine becomes talismanic, its appearance a blessing that signals yet another small victory against emptiness and despair. Japanese women, who once mourned only loss, now gather at wooden tables to trade stories sparked by advertisements and advice columns. They teach themselves, and each other, how to pronounce foreign words, how to dream in a culture not their own. The symbolism of the magazine, once exotic and almost painful to touch, has become an everyday marker, proof that change is slow but inexorable, and that identity can be rebuilt from fragments of story, laughter, and reflection. Documented testimonies grow richer as the year turns. Allied staff write home about moments of gentle joy, seeing former adversaries absorbed in short fiction or laughing softly at comics. Japanese women, in oral histories recorded decades later, recall the magazines with unfeigned wonder. "We received food and kindness, but those books were proof we could imagine contentment, that we could belong in a world elsewhere." The contrast of expectation and lived reality deepens, echoing in every narrative. What was anticipated as a prison becomes, for some, a place of quiet renewal, a space where hope is stitched together from paper, ink, and the steadfast humanity of those once called enemy. Transformation, as shown in historical analysis, is never complete or untroubled. Doubts linger, pain simmers beneath rituals. Some prisoners resist or retreat into the old hierarchies, but as the final days of captivity approach, the magazines become souvenirs, gifts, sometimes smuggled and sometimes blessed by guards, that bear witness to the journey from discipline to abundance, from defeat to the fragile beginnings of trust. And in each story, food remains a faint undertone. It sustains the body, but it is the steady flow of magazines, filled with choice, variety, possibility, that nourishes the mind and rekindles the heart. In the final days of internment, when the gates swing open and the world beyond the barbed wire beckons, the humble magazine, aged, creased, its pages softened by dozens of hands, remains the unexpected heirloom of survival. Japanese women step from captivity carrying few belongings, but among the treasured mementos are pages torn from magazines, images of gardens, recipes that promise a future warmer than the present, glimpses of American abundance woven with the new possibility of choice. For some, these objects find homes above kitchen tables in distant prefectures. For others, they become letters to lost sisters, markers of a time when even defeat was not absolute, and the dignity of curiosity outlived the violence of discipline. The magazine, recurring throughout this true story, is no longer just a portal to distant lands. It remains a symbol of the slow, moral transformation wrought by democracy, the freedom not only to eat, but to imagine, to question, and to rebuild. Where food was once rationed discipline, the magazine allowed for an unhurried feast of dreams, a joining of the private and the collective, the past and the possible. In the hush of memory, long after camp lights dimmed, the sound of turning pages lingers, a faint echo of the democracy that gave human abundance its shape. For what survives war is rarely measured in victories or wounds alone. Sometimes it is found in the ordinary, a loaf of bread passed between strangers, an advertisement read by candlelight, the laughter of women relearning hope after loss. The magazine, threaded through the fabric of captivity and faith, bears the larger truth. Freedom is bred not only in declaration, but in ritual and story. Abundance is not only in what we eat, but in what we allow ourselves to imagine and create, even when history's shadows are slow to recede. This is how memory endures, between the lines, across the meals, through the hands of women whose awe and transformation echo in every shared story. In the heart of war's aftermath, a simple gift becomes the bridge to resilience, and a nation once silenced by discipline rediscovers the quiet, essential language of hope.